Welcome, 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 everyone. This is episode 2 of the Option Menu Crew. I'm very happy that it rhymes. I am your host, Ryan, and I have with me today two of my other crew members, Mark and Paul.
Hello.
Hello.
First one was Mark, second one was Paul. Probably should organize that better, but that's okay. We're just getting used to this, so please forgive us for just trying to figure everything out. Today, with this topic, we're recording in the midst of the world being in a really crazy place. And none of us are ignorant to the news. We're keeping track of it in our local communities as well as just worldwide. It's really hard to not see that, but we are cognizant of that. And part of the reason for this episode's topic today is because while it is important to stay aware of what's going on in the world, um, and show compassion for all the people who are suffering and facing challenges, we wanted to do a topic where we could take a small break, kind of give ourselves a mental recharge, and talk about something positive, just to help balance things out a little bit. So we're not deliberately ignoring anything that's going on. This is specifically for us and you, the listeners, to just take a brief mental break, recharge a little bit, so when you go back to fighting the good fight, you're in a better place, or at least you feel a little energized. So uh, today I approached my friends, and we're doing two sessions. So this first session is me, Mark, and Paul, and then we'll do a second session with some of my other friends. I wanted us to share stories about the positive impacts video games have had on us. And this could have been both stories where a specific moment in a video game impacted you in real life, changed your outlook, changed your mind, made you think in a different way, or there was a positive moment in your video game, a positive moment in your lives that video games facilitated or were around, and any sort of diversity in that. Because as we know, video games can have a huge impact. They can be both a very social activity, but they can also be a solo activity. And a lot of people have made friends, and multiplayer games are huge, and online has only made them even bigger. So there's a lot of these types of experience, and we're all about the same age, so we've been gaming for about the same amount of time, and we have different experiences. And it was just, I think it'd be a good way for us to not only share those things and just kind of let people know what it can be like. And I've heard stories over the years from different podcasts and also people who've written into those podcasts and different users and seen stories online about how video games have been this huge positive impact for a lot of people's lives, and sometimes not only just life changing but life saving. Before I get into my story, because I'll start with mine, Mark, Paul, did you guys want to say anything regarding the video games or whatnot?
Yeah. Well, real quick, we are recording this on June 6th, 2020. Just kind of give a little bit of context. Without going into specifics, there's a lot going on, and
Right.
as Ryan was touching on, video games is what brings us all together, and why we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to add either. I agree with both of you guys. We certainly don't want to ignore what's happening in the world or turn a blind eye or whatever. But at the same time, this is, I guess, kind of an escape from all of that. Hopefully, a positive escape, and well, like you said, a way to recharge potentially. So, yeah, I think with that, I'm certainly ready to share some positive video game experiences with you guys.
Let's do it.
Great, great. Yeah, so I'll go first since it was my idea, and I want to make sure you guys kind of can understand. Hopefully, I'm the more awkward one that'll make you guys more comfortable with whatever stories you're going to share. So this might be a little heavy, but I'm
Okay.
choosing to tell you this story because when thinking about all the different positive moments I've had in video games, trying to think of the ones that aren't like shallow or just, oh yeah, I made some more friends because I played this game. Like we all have those stories where you find someone else who's got something in common, and there's a specific moment I go back to that really did shape my perspective on life, and kind of just it did have a long lasting impact. And I mean, it's a testament that I can still think of it to this day. While I can't remember the specific moment, and exactly what day it was, or day of the week, I do remember the time in my life when this was happening. The moment involves the game Final Fantasy VII, and this is back on PlayStation 1. So I got it. I got Final Fantasy VII for a Christmas present. I believe it was Christmas 1997. I forget exactly, or maybe it was 98 because I forget the difference between the U.S. and the American releases. But I got a PlayStation 1 and a Final Fantasy 7 and a copy of Final Fantasy 7 as a Christmas present that year. And Final Fantasy 7 is one of my favorite video games to this day, the original. And at the time in my life when this was happening, um, I was a way more awkward kid, very much more introverted than I am now, and just I was kind of the nerd in my town. And while there were other nerdy kids with grade school and things like that, it just is tricky to find everyone. Like this was an age pre-internet. This was or the budding internet. Like at best, maybe AOL was starting to happen. And that's for people who don't know what AOL is. Boy, don't worry about it. Um,
AOL Instant
Nerd.
Messenger, that was like the original social media back in the day.
it was the AOL homepage was the start for everyone. So at that time, in grade school, I think it was probably somewhere in middle school for the dates. I'm not going to do the exact math. But I didn't have a lot of friends. Most of the people I hung out with were from family friends. My mom had friends who had kids, and one way or another, I met them. It wasn't. I didn't really have many friends in school. One person that I did know from that did go to the same school as me, but he wasn't in the same class as me, so we didn't even have that chance to connect. I didn't really have that support network, and all the people around me, we were just different. I was like a chubby, overweight, nerdy kid, and I was into Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, cartoons in general, and video games, and everyone around me was just not, or at least not to the degree I was. And I was very lucky and fortunate to have what I did, but it was just, it was alienating all those years. And I was bullied a bit, and it sucked, and so my self-confidence was super low, and there was just it weighed heavy on my mind, and I was just so sad that like I thought I'd have more friends, I thought I'd find people, and it wasn't happening. At least at that time, it wasn't happening, and it was rough for a time. And I remember distinctly while playing Final Fantasy VII, I had a moment where I was watching a cutscene. I don't remember the specific cutscene because I've replayed Final Fantasy VII a couple times after that, and it's hard to say. But I do remember when this moment happened, what I was feeling and what I was thinking is, I was looking at the game, and in the cutscene and the conversation, all of the characters together, and I was just looking at this mishmash of these eight, seven to eight characters all together, just being friends, supporting each other, fighting together, trying to fight this evil, this greater evil, and protect each other, and bonding through mutual tragedy. And I just remember feeling like I want that. I want to know how it feels to have friends like this that that will stick up for me, that I'll stick up for them, where we understand each other. And I distinctly remember that I wanted friends. It wasn't something anything like selfish. It was just I just didn't want to feel alone. And in that game, I could see, especially since the main character had to go through a lot and some misunderstanding and was making mistakes and didn't understand things, and there was just a number of parallels that I could relate to in my immaturity, trying to be something that you're not or wanting to be something that you're not, and discovering you don't have to be that way and you could be something else, and people will still love and accept you.
It's
And
pretty powerful.
thank you. Um, the last point on that was the reason why is because I feel like there's a turning point for a lot of people who have been bullied or are feeling alone, people who are depressed, and I was depressed, and luckily I managed to um, win that fight, at least for the most part. And depression doesn't ever really truly go away, but you get better at managing it. I don't want to disrespect people who are still struggling with it or have gone through it or whatnot. So I don't want to say it's just completely curable or make it sound like, yeah, you can totally get through it. Like it is tough and it can be a struggle, and life is just tough. So that it's something you have to take in stride, and that's part of why we're doing this topic. That moment to me was about a turning point where I could have embraced rejection and rejected society back. And in some ways, I still think there are aspects that I do reject, but I could have outright become like a shut in. I could have completely said, like, you know what? Forget the world. I'm me or whatever. I don't need people like I hate or being repulsed by people because they weren't like me. And in that moment, I feel like that was kind of the crossroads I reached. I could have become more of a isolated human being, but I chose to embrace the fact that I did want more people to understand me, and I wanted to understand people, and I wanted friendships. I wanted relationships. I wanted to build that. I wanted to feel more normal. And so for in that moment, I was able to make that choice, and I think that says a lot about my attitude going forward and the changes and developments I've made going forward. Not that I haven't made other choices and there haven't been other turning points, but that was a very significant core memory for me that I th- that upon reflection I feel speaks a lot to the choices I did make going forward. And I think a lot of people do face these situations where they have to choose what kind of human being they're going to be. And I'm not saying you have to always stick that. You're always learning, you're always learning, you're always growing, you're always getting new information. So your mind can change or you adjust your path, and that's okay. Um, and
Sounds like
video,
it was a very pivotal moment in your life, right?
yeah, it's the one I wanted to say where the video game itself. I could go into all the Final Fantasy VII spoilers, but I don't think that really it doesn't really enhance the point. It's it was that teamwork aspect, and you see this in a lot of other games, and I understand that's part of why like massively multiplayer online RPGs, MMORPGs, are extremely popular, and people can go on, be a character, meet a lot of people, and be social, or even just in say Halo, people go on and or Fortnite and any of those big multiplayer shooters, and people just go on and can voice chat and they can form their crews and companions and meet people because they play regularly. And any sort of uh, large multiplayer game, of course, some communities can be very toxic, but there are still always
Sure.
stories that come out about people making friends and people in this online world making friends that are strictly online. And you hear those stories about like when someone dies in the community and they do these in-game funerals and it's just a beautiful thing. Or people who start actual romantic relationships and then meet each other in real
Oh yeah.
life and get married, and it's amazing to see these people being able to connect that way. I don't necessarily uh, connect with people in that regard. I'm still very traditional, and I like to have those in-person relationships, and then use the digital aspect to reinforce them and maintain them. But I have absolute respect for people where that might be their only option. It might be the only way because I know that feeling of isolation where everyone in your town is just kind of different from you, and it's really hard to connect and find those people, or for one reason or another, because not every nerdy person is a great person. They just might have that thing in common with you, but everything else about them is not great. So, uh,
And to quickly go back to the top of the hour too, the original format and intention, I think, of our current situation with the podcast was to record in person, so that we would all sort of be sitting side by side. But just with the current, outbreak, to say it that way,
yeah, yeah, no,
we're
that's fair.
all remote, so we can't be together. We can't be united, as you were sort of
Yeah.
alluding to a minute ago.
Yeah, and we're not only remote, we're choosing to be remote as well. Things in our community are changing, but we've all mutually respected our own decisions about that, and we're making the choices for ourselves and for our families to protect them as best. So this is not for a lack of understanding or a lack of wanting to be together. This is our way of being together while making the best of the situation.
But I want to go back to a prior thought because you had mentioned how this one moment in time, you're sort of relating your inner self and your being with sort of these virtual characters in Final Fantasy VII. And I thought that was very interesting, and how you essentially didn't allow those external sources impact your internal being. And I thought that was very powerful. That was kind of like that pivotal moment in your story, in the sense that you could have, crumbled, and you could have allowed all that negative energy from, other people in school, being outside school, wherever it may be, impact you and reshape sort of your mold. But, you held firm. And I know things in elementary school are never easy for a lot of people, but you spit out Power Rangers, you spit out two or three different items,
Hmm.
Ninja Turtles, but like all of these topics have become sort of the quote unquote accepted, or very cool. We all know Star Wars has just become this massive, massive corporation rather, just in the last decade or more, even though it's been around all our lives, if not many years prior.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that too when I was listening to you talk, and you were talking about how you were kind of a nerd and you liked Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and all that stuff. And I think for anybody that's listening, especially younger people, would have to realize people who are our age when we were growing up, that kind of stuff wasn't cool. I feel like it's become a lot more accepted now, especially once you got to middle school and high school. If you liked superheroes, if you liked comic books, if you liked Star Wars, anything like that, you were pretty much considered a nerd. And that at that time really wasn't a good thing. You're kind of considered sort of an outcast. Whereas I feel like in the last couple of years, like you said, Mark, with Star Wars becoming such a big franchise, and I think those Marvel movies have really helped because that's kind of made superheroes seem like cool, seem super cool in a mainstream kind of way, and make comic books seem cool instead of, oh, just comic books are this thing that, nerdy people do. Now it's like, well, comic books are awesome. So, yeah, so that was something I was thinking about when you were mentioning your experiences back then. Is I feel like times have changed in that regard, at least maybe for the better. Whereas as things that weren't as accepted back then have become more accepted or thought of as more cool now. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's in the last decade or so, it's definitely been that, and for the reasons you've stated, the Marvel movies, and just this general shift. The internet has made so much more information available, and people are just being exposed to so much more. And it's just a stigma that's gradually evolved because obviously we've gotten older. Other people who've grown up with video games that are even older than us have gotten older, have experienced it, and there's just been a shift in that style that style
Mhm.
of thinking. So being a nerd is no longer what it used to be. There
right.
are people who try to turn it as being derogatory, but ultimately, and this is one of those key things where even as a young kid, because I don't know how I came to realize certain things like this, but it was I distinctly remember because it's funny. One time, my mom, who's a teacher and in special education, and so she's used to working with people who and children who have special needs that need to be approached in a different way and need certain things in order to just help them. And it's not their fault. It's just what it is, and they don't deserve to be treated badly for it. But I remember
Or treated differently.
yeah, I distinctly remember making a point to her about when I was watching Pokemon, and I forget exactly what it was, but I was talking about like all the nerdy stuff that I was into, the cartoons and video games and things like that. And I made the argument to her, I'm like, I know it's not real, but they're still inspirational to me. That's not quote for quote what I was saying, but my intention was like Ash Ketchum from Pokemon. He's trying to be the best there ever was. He's trying to be the best Pokemon trainer ever. And even if Pokemon aren't real, that idea of pouring yourself into something to just want to be the best that you can, like that is a theme that is universal and is worth admiring and paying attention to. And that's usually what the best fiction is supposed to be. It's supposed to be inspirational stories for people to latch onto and then take with them into real life. And while I did, like any kid should go out in the yard and play and use their imagination and do things, I got good at compartmentalizing information. I always realized the difference between fantasy and reality. I
Hmm.
still harbor the feelings I want to make as much fantasy in reality as possible, which is just, trying to have as much fun with life as you can, in the more practical sense. But that's a thing there where I've always was able to kind of be level-headed, and what Mark was commenting on before about keep that spirit of my being was I don't know how, and I can't say there was a specific reason for it other than I think that leads back to part of my attitude where I wanted to connect with people and understand them, I needed to find that balance so I could also become more approachable myself with having my nerdy habits and show people like I'm not that much different from you. I'm just into other things. Like you guys like your sports teams and your sports players. I like my fantasy characters in the fantasy stories. Like it's just different. It's not something worth being stigmatized over because ultimately we're both just wasting our time on something that really doesn't matter overall in terms of entertainment. You know, I'm not talking about education or politics or things that actually matter, like learning how to pay your bills or file your taxes. I'm just talking about what you do in your free time, and people shouldn't
Don't.
be as hateful or as judgmental
Yeah.
when it comes to those things.
I think that's the big thing is judgmental, not accepting what others, believe to be cool or what they're most interested in. But, it's I was thinking back, we were talking about what's sort of cool, what was nerdy back then, but it's going to be funny to kind of see, flash forward, like it's 2020, like is it going to be in 2025 when Minecraft is no longer the cool thing that all the kids are playing, or like is Fortnite? It seems like it's in its early stages that people are kind of flipping the switch and staying away, but it's just a matter of time. So it's not so much about what's cool right now, but it's just be yourself, and people that are like-minded will find you, or you'll eventually find them. I think that's kind of what brought all three of us together now, is that we had those common interests. So
Yeah, yeah, that's good advice because yeah, it is tough, especially when you're a kid, to kind of understand that. I know it was tough for me. Like, I wanted, you guys know me, I've always been in the Ninja Turtles and maybe some more stuff that would be considered nerdy, but when you're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, at least for me, I kind of had wanted to be that cool kid. I kind of wished I had, I was part of the popular crowd or whatever you want to call it. But looking back on it now that I'm older, I could see and appreciate, like, wow, I had great friends anyway. I didn't need to be part of that crowd or part of that crew. I had, I knew I had like-minded individuals, like you said, and we were friends, and they were great friends to me. And but when you're a kid, especially in middle school and high school, it's kind of tough to see those things.
absolutely.
And it's a core time in your life where a lot of development happens, and that's where I was speaking to is we make a lot of decisions that just impact the rest of our lives and our attitudes going forward. So those core times can mean a lot. And even as an adult with my perspective, and I'm not trying to harp too much on this. It's not that I actively resisted like getting into things like sports or other activities. It's just that natural. You know when you're interested in something or you find something compelling, and sometimes you try it and you love it. Sometimes you try it and you're like, I don't hate this, but maybe I never need to do it again. Or there's things where you're just like you try it and then you're like, oh no, this was totally not what I want. I don't need to ever do this again. And when I calmed down and had some more friends and a better support network and didn't feel as isolated or alone and felt like I had more more room for error, I reflected and it's just like I'm just not interested in those things. I don't have any resentment now towards other people or whatnot. I don't like the way I got treated back then, but I don't hold it against them for being interested. And at one point I did. At one point I was definitely like, "Oh man, you're so stupid because you follow sports." But now that's like I fully admit I was wrong in that, and that was just me being petty and feeling hurt, and that's where that resentment came from. And I've let go of that. It is still disappointing to not feel like I have as many opportunities to connect with people in the way I'd prefer to, and that's obviously not the current crowd withstanding. And that's where I've just become okay with. It's okay to meet a few people and have just a few really good friends, and you don't need to have dozens and dozens of friends in your life to feel valuable and understand and appreciate relationships at different levels and being able to socialize without just relying on video games as the core thing, even if that is my favorite thing. So, uh,
Well, video games is the largest form of entertainment, right? So there are
yeah,
more game nerds than there are movie buffs and all the other forms of entertainment.
or at least they spend a lot more money than the other people. So,
True, yeah.
depending on how you want to talk about those stats, but yeah,
hundred
yeah, it's
dollar deluxe collectible editions with huge figurines. Yeah, so that might help rather than $20 movie tickets.
yeah. That was my story. So I hope set the tone, and I just wanted to share that story, and I did deliberately pick that story to make it okay if you wanted to get heavier discussion. This is a safe space, and I'm starting with me, and I'm not expecting you guys to have as heavy a story as I do or whatnot, but I wanted to make sure that everyone felt comfortable and that there wasn't some sort of weird expectation, or are we gonna pretend that we need to tone it down so we're not getting mushy gushy
No,
or something like that.
we're all friends here, and
Yeah.
no, it was a good story because it's something that we can all relate to still. You know, whether we're watching a movie where we see a hero on TV or we're playing a video game and we kind of want to distance ourselves from the real environment we're living in and play sort of in that virtual environment. No, I think that was very powerful, and I think very inspirational. You know, just based on how you proceeded with your life and made that decision because you know unfortunately some kids just can't break through that, and it's not their own wrongdoing. It's just
Yeah.
it's a difficult time to make that pivotal decision. So
Hmm. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was good. Yeah, very good story. Tough to follow. I certainly don't have anything nearly as heavy, so but I can share my story next if you guys want, Mark, unless you
yeah,
would prefer it to go.
Yeah.
no, go for it.
Yeah, thank you
All
guys. Go
right.
Paul.
Yeah, so mine, like I said, is not going to be nearly as heavy. It's going to be maybe a little bit more on the fun memory side, I guess.
That's completely fine.
Also, before I start, I apologize in advance. Somebody outside is hammering something extremely loud. It's like reverberating through the entire house. So I apologize if you could hear that in the background. My cats are running around like, what is this? But anyway, on
So
to
far
my
so good
story.
though. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
didn't
good.
if you wouldn't have said anything, wouldn't have even thought so. But thank you.
Cool. So my story is kind of it's going to be relate. It's not one specific positive experience, but it's going to be a couple positive experiences that I had related to a video game. And that video game is the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater for the PS1.
Yes,
Amazing.
Classic. It
Mhm.
also happens to be my favorite game of all time, but I do have a lot of positive experiences with it.
Mhm.
such perfect timing too with the remakes coming out later this year.
Yeah, yeah, the remakes one and two that they at least from the trailers they look pretty awesome. So
Online multiplayer.
definitely excited for that. One of these days I'll get a modern system and get that. But anyway, so yeah, so that game. So this was back in '99, I believe the game came out, and I got it not too long after it came out. I actually the first time I played it was over a friend's house. He had one of those. Remember those like demo discs you would get at like Pizza Hut, and it would have like 10 games on them.
Yeah.
And he had one of those, and one of the games was Tony Hawk, and you could just play. You had two characters. I think it was Tony Hawk and Kareem Campbell, and you could play the warehouse level.
Mhm.
And I was just like, oh my god, this game's so amazing. And I eventually got it. So anyway, the couple positive experiences that I had with it was with the music. So if you guys remember, that game had a soundtrack of I think there was about 10 or so different bands, and at that time that was still pretty new.
Yeah.
Prior to that, for whether it was Super Nintendo, Sega, or even some of the early PlayStation and N64 games, you would have just a audio soundtrack, which was still awesome. But this was sweet. I remember like, oh my god, these are real songs, these are real bands. This is amazing. It was so
Tons of
shocking.
licensed music, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Just at that time, it was so different and new.
I can still
But
hear it
so,
in my head.
yep, yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing is like it. I think having that it like helps you relate. Like when I hear one of those songs, like it kind of takes me back to where I was in the game. But one of the positive things is that music in that game really helped me to open up. It helped to open me up to a new genre of music because at that time, so 1999, I was 14, 15. Those were still, your formative years. I was still kind of getting into different types of music, trying to, figure out what I liked, what I didn't like. Probably the most famous song from Tony Hawk is Superman by Goldfinger. I think that's the one that
Yep.
everybody remembers. That was the one on the demo. And that actually, I loved that song. And I actually ended up getting super into Goldfinger after that. I had never heard of them before. I know they'd been around for a while. I think they had maybe two albums out at that time. After I heard that song, I was like, I gotta hear more of them. So I went out and bought one of their CDs, and they ended up becoming one of my favorite bands in high school. Just because of that. Had it not been for that game, I would have probably never heard of them. Like that was still the early days of the internet. There was no social media, so discovering bands, especially bands that weren't super mainstream, was a little bit more difficult. So that was pretty awesome because it gave me this band that I'd never heard of that would turn into something I would listen to almost every day. And in addition to that, it opened my eyes to a lot of different music. That original soundtrack had all kinds of punk music on it. I guess you'd say it had, there was like a song by the Dead Kennedys, the Vandals, bands I had never heard of before, but, I know are kind of staples in the sort of underground punk rock community in the 80s and 90s. So, yeah, so that was a real positive experience for me. It's just like opening my eyes to like, wow, there's all this music like that I've never heard before. That's amazing. And, after that, I started listening to it, and it really, it certainly influenced my style of music and what I listen to moving forward. So that's part one of my positive experience with Tony Hawk. Part two, it kind of goes to what you said in the intro of how video games help you make friends. I got really good at Tony Hawk. Tony Hawk is a game I can legitimately say I'm better than almost anybody at. I can't say that for any other game. Like, you guys know me,
Ooh,
I like video games,
amazing.
but
a challenge.
I know. I like video games, but I'm not a huge gamer. You guys know that. Like, I'm fine. I could play, but I'm certainly not an expert. But Tony
Casual
Hawk is the
gamer.
one game. Yeah, exactly. Tony Hawk is the one game that I played so much, and I got so good. And I used to go through and just practice and try to figure out all the moves, like every special move and what were the best combos to do and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So anyway, there was this one kid in our friend group who I was kind of close with, and he was also really good at Tony Hawk. So my best friend told him like we have to play, like, this kid's awesome, you're awesome, whatever. So we ended up having this challenge with each other about who could be the first one to break 1,000,000 points in the first level, in the warehouse level, without any cheats or anything like that. And this got like so much, I guess, attention that I'll never forget. It was at my SATs, when we were taking the SATs. The kid that was sitting next to me, who I had never really talked to before, like I knew who he was, he was like, "Hey, like I heard you're trying to break 1,000,000 points in Tony Hawk or something like that." So
Oh
it
my
was just one
God.
of those things where you kind of like made some friends, and
You're starting to become
I
famous.
yeah, exactly. And I actually ended up I ended up breaking 1,000,000 points first. So it was good.
Nice.
But yeah, so it kind of I'll never forget that. It got like a lot of people talking, and people who I had never talked to before were kind of bringing it up, and you find out like you some mutual interests with other people who you maybe didn't realize that you had mutual interests with before. So that was fun. And then the very last part of my positive Tony Hawk thoughts are that it not only did it introduce me to a new kind of music scene, but it really introduced me to a new culture that I loved, like that whole skate culture. Now, I'm not a skater. I wish I was. This game made me really want to skateboard, but I tried and I was terrible. I couldn't even. I just could not get the hang of it. I could like barely just skate down the driveway without losing my balance. So that never happened. But it kind of opened my eyes as well to that whole culture of skating, which at that time was starting to become a lot more mainstream. That was when like the X Games were on ESPN, and certain like pop punk bands like Blink 182 were becoming big, and that kind of music was starting to become more mainstream. So Tony Hawk really helped to open my eyes to that scene, that like skating scene, which I still think is an awesome scene. It's, at least at that time, I had become friends with a lot of people, and from my experiences, everybody in that kind of skate culture scene at that time was very positive, and a lot of them were kind of straight edge, things like that. Were kind of anti-drug and anti-smoking and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's my experience. So like I said, it's not necessarily one positive experience, but a handful of positive experiences that I have tied to that game, and to this day that remains my favorite game of all time, not just because I love it and think it's a great game, but because it does bring back those memories and those experiences that still have had a lasting effect on me today. So that's my story.
I
Paul, I want to say I think you summed up the impact that the Tony Hawk games have had on literally like everyone.
Yeah.
Um,
millions.
it
Well,
it
that's yeah.
Yeah, the 1,000,000 point thing is unique to you. I definitely say that. I don't like that wasn't a thing. I wasn't really talking about it with other people, and like I said, I
Mhm.
didn't have a lot of people around me to just talk video games with. The music, like it's super iconic, and it's one of the few times where I'm like, if I heard a song that was from Tony Hawk, like I could immediately go, yeah, that was from that game.
Right.
And I can still picture myself in the warehouse playing the game, playing the characters, flipping through the half pipe, and
Yep.
Smashing through
hearing,
the glass.
"Here I
Smashing through the
am,
glass. Yep.
getting
Yep.
older all the time." Yeah, it's like you just grinding, trying to figure out all those tricks, getting all the letters, and a couple
Yes,
times I had friends over and we'd play split screen, whether it was on N64 or PlayStation.
that's right.
And yeah, opening up to music, and I was particularly sheltered from music, and I'm still not a huge music buff, but I've tried to diversify more
Mhm.
as time goes on. But yeah, that was also a big exposure to a bunch of rock and punk maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not good with the
Yeah.
genres. Those different things, and kind of feeling like, oh man, this is other music that I could listen to, because my mom was pretty much just a Phil Collins nut. So whenever we were in the car, she'd be putting on one of those tapes, or the radio, and you know how the radio is. But way back then, like you'd hear a song you'd like, and maybe you'd get lucky, and it's the popular song. So just about every other car trip, you'd hear that song, but you could never hear them with regularity, and it was difficult to understand, especially as a kid. Like, oh, you buy tapes to listen to this, and there was just
Yeah.
a few movie soundtracks here and there. So that in that regard, I relate heavily with the music. Then the this oh, I forgot my thought for the second part.
Paul,
Well.
I
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
real quick, I definitely have a video I have to share with you. I
Hmm.
have, you know me, you know how big of a Blink 182 fan I am.
Oh yeah.
Also grew up skateboarding. I know I could ollie. I was really good at
Really?
manualing. Like I could
I never
manual.
knew this. This is
Really?
news to me.
Holy
You learn
crap!
something new
Yeah.
about Mark every day. Look at this.
After you told that story, I'm like, we all three of us easily would have been best friends in elementary school. You know, I know we're a couple ages, a couple grades apart, but I know that we all would have been best friends.
It
You
is
know,
funny.
easily.
It's funny you mentioned that because this was, I want to say maybe like 2015. So Ryan, this was after you left when we were all working together.
Hmm.
But I think somebody had brought up, this was when we were like eating. Remember, Mark, we used to eat lunches together. There was a whole group of us or whatever, and we had mentioned somebody mentioned like, I wonder, it might have been Adam, that like, what would have happened if we were all the same age and we had met in middle school or high
Yeah.
school or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
would we have been friends? Would we have been? And I actually remember thinking, I can't remember if I actually said it at the time, or I remember thinking that like, out of everybody that was there at the table that day, I was like, I would definitely have been friends with Mark the most, just like
Aw.
knowing my personality in middle school and high school and what I'm into and like what you're into and stuff like that. I just, I feel like had we known each other back then, we definitely would have would have been friends or at least in the same friend group and hung out.
You're gonna make me shed a tear. Ryan's story almost did that, but
Uh,
you after saying
tears everywhere.
that.
I definitely was wondering if I was going to choke up, because when I was thinking about telling the story the first time and kind of drafting it in my head, I was getting choked up, and I didn't, but it definitely is something where just reflecting on it, and especially with everything going on, it's something that just hits that spot. I do remember, and
Yeah.
Mark was saying the same thing. I did try skateboarding for real because of Tony Hawk, and I
Hmm.
didn't end up following through with it because I was too afraid of getting hurt, and I also
Yeah.
wasn't super coordinated. So I was like, nah, you know what? Not gonna break an ankle over this. Just gonna let it go. So I did get like a cheap skateboard, hand me down skateboard from someone. Like my mom was a teacher, so she probably knew some people and was able to get one from a confiscation or something like that. But yeah, I did try skateboarding. I just wasn't good. And I will say this: if we had met back in grade school, and specifically for my time, it would have been more like middle school-ish. And it really does depend. I think in high school, so sorry, I wanted to position this in a much more funny way, which is no, we totally wouldn't have been friends. But that's not because of you guys. I totally own, like, because of the bullying and my low self-esteem back then, I just naturally distrusted most people, even when they tried to reach out to me. And
Yeah.
I can
Hmm.
distinctly remember times where either now I do feel like people were legitimately trying to reach out to me, and I was just too scared, too nervous, etc., about trying to open myself up to that. But in reflection, I'm not sure if it was sincere or not, but there were opportunities where I could have. And definitely in high school, when I did actually get a chance to start meeting people who were like me, I was able to find some people who like wanted to do a D&D group, and one guy was really cool, and he invited me into that, and it was just a great connecting period, and really started turning my mind. I made some other friends that weren't that weren't just huge video game people. Like they owned the original Xbox, and we played Halo like local multiplayer and stuff. But then we'd hang out, we'd go in the pool, we'd walk around in the woods and stuff, and just or like do a mock football game. And I would play certain sports with other people. I just wasn't very good or coordinated, and I didn't follow like the big leagues and stuff. But I did open myself up over time to like playing stuff, and I did like basketball and I wasn't very good at soccer, but I'd play it. And volleyball's a lot of fun. Those are good party sports,
Yeah.
or baseball or kickball and things like that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I know what you mean, especially about people reaching out to you, or and you kind of being reclusive, I guess, because I kind of had some of that too. And looking back on it now, it was kind of ridiculous. Of like, just because I don't know, when I was in high school, I had a good group of friends. Like I had a good amount of friends. I was just kind of an average person. I wasn't popular. I wasn't unpopular. I was just kind of a guy that was there. But I had this like fear of just like almost like I couldn't be friends with like the kids who were considered popular. Like they wouldn't accept me or whatever. And I always remember there was this girl who actually lived around the block from me, and she was like one of the head cheerleaders. She was a homecoming queen, all that stuff.
mm,
And a couple times we had all kinds of classes together, and there were a couple times where we had to be partnered up in groups or whatever. And like looking back on it now, she was always super nice to me, but I probably barely said two words to her, just because like in my mind at that
yep,
time it was like, oh my god, she's so popular, how could I can't, like, she's just not on my level. Like I felt
yeah,
like I wasn't good enough almost. Now looking at it back at my age now, it's ridiculous, but at the time when I was 15, 16, however old I was, I just kind of had that thought in my head. And like now looking back on it, I'm like, God, if I can go back in time, I would have talked to her. Who cares? Like, what's a big deal? But at that time, it was just like I felt almost like, I don't know. I was like, oh, I can't. Like, I'm not on that level. Like they're on this like upper level that's like too good for me or something. I don't know. It's just a stupid thing
We're
in my
all
head.
we're all equal, but when we're young and innocent, we have no idea.
Yeah.
oh yeah, totally. And in relation to that as well, like I to speak to some of like those awkward moments where that built up the trust, because I was so afraid of people making fun of me at the same time. And some of those
Yeah.
do involve like different girls. Like I had a lot of crushes in high school. I'm sure we all had a lot of crushes, but
Mhm.
I feel like thinking about it, like it was definitely like I feel like I almost crushed on like 6, 7 different girls at one point. It
Look at
was
you.
yeah. Well, I mean, I had the crush, so there's no
Yeah.
real compliment there. Oh, I thought a lot of girls were cute. What's the big deal there? So I don't think any congratulations
Ooh.
is necessary. But yeah, like at one point I had made the mistake of telling the one girl who was friendly, but she was the gossip girl. I didn't have a crush on her. It was just she was one of the
uh
few people I felt comfortable like talking to in like the small group of people I was comfortable talking to at like a lunch
right.
table or whatnot, who didn't like actively make fun of me. And I had made the mistake of mentioning who my crushes were, and
Oh
she
no.
spread it around. And oh, that
That's
just
tough.
made things worse, because even though some of them did actually try talking to me, I was just so like, And the one who was my biggest crush, I remember hearing her in the hallway once going like, he doesn't even try to talk to me, and I was just like, oh no,
The
like,
worst.
because I kind of didn't really have a point too, and going harkening back to the AOL Instant Messenger, there was a couple of them I did try talking online too. It never really went anywhere, but yeah, it's just just super awkward phase. And looking back, you go like,
Yeah.
oh man, all that's dumb, but there was a lot
Right.
of
Yeah.
elements surrounding it
It's
where
easy to
it's
look back now, 10, 15 years later, however long, but at the time, you don't realize. I always felt like, because I had the same thing as you, where I was afraid to tell anybody and even trust people, even some of my close friends.
yeah.
And I felt like almost like George McFly in Back to the Future, and he says like what if they say no, or what if they say I'm no good. I don't know if I can handle that kind of rejection. That was kind of that's how I always felt. I guess, and I still feel like that with a lot of things today too. It's like I don't know if I could handle that kind of rejection. So um, yeah, but
What's the worst that could happen, though? They say
exactly.
no.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah,
Life's about taking challenges and risks. So,
I like
but
it.
that's for another part of
Yeah,
that's for another
whole
day.
Yeah, we've kind of gone enough on a tangent, but yeah.
we're all
S-
relating to people. It's kind of what it is.
yeah,
It's about
Yeah.
relating to
absolutely.
those stories. So it's good.
Skateboarding though, I if I don't buy a skateboard before this quarantine is over, that will be shocking. I have had it on my eyes, in my dreams, in my thoughts, 24/7. Like, I don't know what triggered it. It was earlier this year. I think it was just like, well, I want to get into a new hobby or do something different with my time. And this is, back in March 2020. And skateboarding was something that I loved. And I never like pushed my boundaries and my limits and learned new things with it. So I really just, like I said, I ollied and I manual, but I never really learned how to kickflip, and I knew like the fundamentals, but I just couldn't really get up to the next level in a way. But I have quite an inspirational video that I want to share with you, Paul, after this conversation tonight.
Yeah.
Red Bull Skateboarding, their YouTube channel recently published a video where these two guys were blind and skateboarding, and it
Oh,
is incredible.
that's cool.
I mean, it's not like they're, not even to say it this way, but they're not half-assing it. They're full on skateboarding. It's incredible, and it's inspirational, just as both your stories as well. And I love the punk rock elements, and we'll definitely have to hang out, and maybe we'll get some skateboards and listen to punk rock together
I was
this
gonna say
summer.
next time we hang out, I want to see you skateboard definitely.
Yeah. Well, I don't have one right now. That's why I'm saying
Yeah.
I'm looking at opportunities to potentially buy one. So
Yeah, it's your
my
turn, Mark.
story. Yeah. So as you guys were talking, I was trying to place an exact era. This was going back about 5 years ago, so 2015. So this is post college, which definitely was a point in my life where I did find video games. Where I'm going with this is kind of like the social elements, and to kind of flash forward to modern day. All three of us are talking right now. We have that ability. We could also be playing a game right now, and you know having that camaraderie and sharing those stories, which to me has always been what video games is all about. In the past like decade or so, I tend not to really play very many single players, and it's not that I don't like single player stories. I just, when I have downtime, I get busy doing other stuff, and it's rare that I just sit down for a half an hour or an hour to just focus on one thing, being a video game, and not do anything else. But that aside, I always was talking with my brothers all through college, pretty much using the platform of Xbox. I think majority of our time was being spent on Xbox. But flash forward a few more years later, again honing in on 2015, and Rainbow Six Siege on PC had come out, and I think I was playing a lot with my brother and maybe a couple other friends. But you know, by way of linking social accounts or whatever it may be, it's like, hey, you have X number of shared friends, you should add this person or that person, but you don't really ever know who these people are. And it just so happened to be that one of my close friends in college, or we were pretty close. I wouldn't say close, but like he was definitely somebody that I hung out with probably sophomore and junior year. He graduated a year before me, so by the time it was my senior year, he had already, left. But he was playing this game as well, and this is a game that I was spending a lot of time in. Just, took a risk, took a challenge, reached out to him. I'm like, hey, I haven't talked to you in years, probably 5, 6 years, graduating 2010, flash forward to 2015. So it had been about 5, 6 years since I had probably talked to him last. And again, we were close in college, but we started playing, and now I actually see him. I saw him last weekend. I've seen him a couple times. He's an hour away, and it's one of those things. It's one of those moments in my life that it's like, you know, we never had to talk. We just kind of got brought together from a video game and have totally like reinvented our relationship which I think is very cool. Maybe a little corny, but have you guys ever had like an experience like that maybe you haven't talked to somebody, but then you sort of find that common bound or common interest, and then you sort of take it off from there?
Yeah, I have, but not through video games though. So that's a really good story, and I think it shows that video games could bring people together. Because I feel like when we were growing up, video games were still kind of that like where parents would say like, oh, you're just lazy playing these video games, get outside,
Hmm.
that blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And I think your story goes to show that yeah, not only are they fun and have other positive things that we've talked about earlier, but yeah, they could help you meet new friends, reach out to old friends, reconnect with people who you didn't even know you were friends with, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've definitely had people more through like Facebook that maybe I used to be friends with when I was little. We kind of lost touch and then maybe got back in touch. But no, that's a good story. I can't say that I've had a video game experience like that, so that's really cool.
Nice. What about
Yeah,
you, Ryan?
yeah. For me, it was. I've had a few stories like that, but it's usually since I wasn't used to reaching out to people, I would usually be talking to like a friend or a family member that I was close to. Like I was lucky to have a couple cousins around my age, so I had that connection, and they some of them helped me, inviting me to social gatherings and meeting other people. But usually what would happen is they would say like, "Hey, I heard you like this video game," and they say they like this video game, and then I'd get that conversation rolling with that. It'd be like, "Oh, hey, how, you know, oh, you play? What do you play, or who do you play, or depending on what the game is." And we'd start that conversation and kind of gauge that. And that was obviously way more awkward when I was younger, so it was difficult with that. But yeah, I've kicked off a few friendships just from the fact of like, yeah, he's into this video game or they're into this video game, and we just start the conversation. But
Yeah.
uh, it, it it was also I even forget because like and like you guys, I forget exactly like when we first like obviously we were all working together and so we had that outside influence, but I forget like where our first conversations were where we were like, oh hey, what do you play? And all of a sudden it was like the conversation just never stopped.
Yeah.
I think for us, well, for me and you, I think somehow you found out that I was huge into Ninja Turtles, and you were like, "Oh my god, I love Ninja Turtles!" And I
Yeah.
think that's for us. That's how we started becoming, friends outside
Hmm.
of rather than just seeing each other every day at work. I think it was like, "Oh my god, we both love Ninja Turtles. This is it."
Trying to think back to with how we all met, but I know all three of us were mutual colleagues in another past life. So that's sort of how we, in a way, were forced to be brought together. But obviously, flash forward, 7 years, if not, yeah, it actually be 7 years since I've moved to this area. So
That's
it's
crazy.
it's
I
been.
remember when you came, your first day. It's crazy.
But yeah, that was kind of my story and how, somebody that I was in close contact with, and then just, we went our distant ways, not because of anybody said anything or did anything. It just, same thing could be said with so many relationships from elementary school, middle school, or high school when people are moving to different towns through all those years. And then we go to college, and I was going away from I think I was about 8 hours away from my hometown. There was that, and then moving to an area, being so close, seeing he was also playing the same game. It's like, hey, come on, and now he plays with actually my best man from my wedding more than I do. Like he's talking with him almost every single day. So it's great that we, that one mutual thing brings us all together, and we have those lifelong relationships, or at least that's what we all hope for.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
I
great.
wanted to ask because I know you have a couple brothers, Mark, so that was an aspect I wanted to bring up. And Paul, I know you have some siblings too, right?
I just have a sister.
Okay, so,
She's 3 years younger than me.
I do
okay,
also have a sister, for the record.
yeah. So that was another aspect of like those things where those bonding experiences, how well did that occur, or where did video games play that? Because I unfortunately didn't have a brother, and I had always wanted a brother mainly because I wanted someone to like share my interests with, and it seemed like if I had a brother, it would have been much more natural. And my sister, she was more of a normal person, and that's I'm not saying that in any sort of mean way. It's just we didn't really connect because I was a nerdy person, and she ended up growing up like she did cheerleaders, she did Girl Scouts, she did just much more normal kid stuff, and every once in a while she would try to play video games, but I was also super selfish, and it was dumb. And the few times like she'd sit and watch, or the few times uh, I'd be made to share with her or something. And we all know back in the days of memory cards where it's like, hey, don't mess with my save file. We don't want like all those petty little things that really don't mean much back then. And I played a lot more single player games, so it wasn't like really gave her a chance to really play um, too much with me. So we were just different people, so I didn't really get that bonding experience. I didn't know if for like Mark or Paul, if you guys have anything related to like your siblings and whatnot. So that wasn't really a positive thing, but it was, but just it is something I wanted to ask.
It's something I'm hoping to dive into a little bit more. I've always played video games so much with my brothers. I haven't so much with my older brother, just with the quarantine. His schedule's a little bit different, but I have been able to talk a lot more with my younger brother recently, who's also a big skateboarder and I think still skateboards. So I've been asking him about the different brands and all that to go back to Paul's story. But my sister actually bought a Switch right before the quarantine, which is the first console she's ever owned. So it's my goal, and I'm trying to not be too aggressive with it. But if she buys, cart, we will all then have the exact same game. She only plays Animal Crossing right now, but I know she's loving it out west.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yep.
my sister never got into video games. She would try here and there, but it was just never her thing. I remember a period of time, I want to say, I think it was when she was in high school. It was just after I was out of high school. And for whatever reason, she got huge into Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers for Nintendo. For some reason, she was like obsessed with playing it. That's the only game I ever remember her playing in my entire life, or at least remember her playing a lot. But yeah, so she we never played anything together really, not for any reason other than it just wasn't her thing. But fortunately, my friend down the street, Johnny, he still down the street from me. We were best friends when we were kids, and he had two younger brothers, so we used to play video games all the time. So it kind of felt almost like I had younger brothers to play games with because we used to, like I said, they were right down the street, so we'd have sleepovers all weekend and play video games together. So
Yeah, and I do want to pick up this point, but I think it's time we take a little bit of break, and then we have another friend who will be joining us, so we'll be catching them up off mic, and then we will start the second half of this positivity episode of Option Menu Crew.
We're gonna cut for an advertisement break, right?
Yes, we are sponsored by video games. Keep playing them, everybody. All right, we'll be back shortly. Hey, welcome back, everyone. We're back from our break. For you guys, it was probably only like a second, and for us, it was definitely a couple minutes as we brought Mike on to the call. And Paul unfortunately had to go, but we've caught Mike up on the stories we've shared so far, and we were just talking about our relationship with our siblings and if video games plays any part of that. And Mike also has a couple siblings, so we wanted to bring Mike in on that part. So yeah, Mike, tell us a bit about if you and your siblings play video games or what that kind of looks like, and then go ahead and share your story.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, I think that throughout my life, video games have played a big role with me and my siblings. When I was a lot younger, I was always trying to get my sisters into playing video games, and also cousins and other family members. Me and one of my sisters, we used to like to play the Mario Party games, and I don't know if either of you have played Pac-Man Fever. It was kind of like another party type game, Mario Party type
Yeah.
game.
Well, that yes.
I've heard of it, but I didn't know it was that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that was like Namco's Mario Party,
Okay.
and me and my sister Jenna, we played Pac-Man Fever a lot, and then she would also like watch me play video games, and she was into Animal Crossing when that came out on the GameCube. So we both had our own houses, and uh, she really enjoyed that when she was younger. I mean, now she's like making fun of it, but when we were younger, and even now, like whenever we get together with like cousins and siblings, we always play like Mario Kart or Super Smash or Mario Party. I've been able to play video games a lot with my siblings.
Nice, yeah. Similar situation with me. Like I said before, me and my sister aren't really close on video games, but I think we could all kind of relate. Like when Nintendo Wii first came out and you got Wii Sports, most people were very open to playing Wii Sports because it was so intuitive to play. So there was a small boom in gaming popularity there in my family, where I bought the Wii on launch day and I showed everyone Wii Sports, and everyone was willing to give it a try, especially because like nearly everyone in my family loved bowling. And it was funny because some of my female cousins who ended up dating guys who were big into games or whatnot would also be willing to try more games, and so some of that lasted on them. Not that they necessarily became like hardcore gamers, but they were willing to either own a system or buy a system just to have, or were more interested in being like, hey, we're gonna have like a party, maybe you could bring that, and we could, we can all play, and that was really cool when that situation sort of developed.
Yeah, and they always enjoyed platformers and Pokemon too. They like those types of games as well, or at least growing up, we all played them.
That's really cool. Yeah. So, what is your positive story about video games in your life?
Okay, so it actually kind of relates to the Wii. When I first got the Wii, it included the Wii Sports game, and that game I think really had a big impact because I remember having family and stuff over to, well, not specifically to play it, but we were gathered for like a holiday or something, and I just remember the one time my grandpa he got into Wii bowling with us, and he would do the full like motion control, like back up and like swing it like he was actually bowling, which was pretty emotional, I thought, because he could no longer go to a bowling alley and bowl. So I, I thought that was pretty impactful to me, and just being able to gather with friends and family to play the different Wii sports we play, Wii Party. I thought that was really impactful on my life. So that's my
That's
story.
I think that's pretty incredible because it's definitely one of those things that, I'm sure you said your grandfather, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's nice with when you can bring more of your family into gaming, and gaming has become so much more diverse now that there's more opportunities than ever. For example, my mom loves collecting children's storybooks, and there's been some new like indie video games where I'm like, oh man, I would really love to share this with her because they have like these illustrated art styles. The one specific game I wanna play with her one of these days is I just forgot. It's this really painterly game that's about, oh, the Unfinished Swan. That's the game, the Unfinished Swan, and I played through it on my own, and it is very much just a storybook. It is very much like a kid's storybook tale, and it's even like poetry in motion. And there's a couple other games like this other indie game called Gris or Gris. It's spelled Gris, and that is a game about dealing with grief, but the art style I think and the gameplay is, it's like it's meant to be very deliberately metaphor, and I'd love to share that with her, but she's not really interested in games. She's kind of just let me have my thing, and she's been a great parent, and she's getting ready to retire, which is amazing. So I'm hoping that at some point I get a chance to have her over when she's got more free time and be able to share that with her and show her like, hey, you know video games can be really cool, and I think there's some things that you would find fascinating. And I've talked to her before because she's a teacher and she's an administrator now, but she still works with a lot of kids. And I've tried to explain to her about the cool things about video games, where I'm like, hey, Minecraft being a game in schools is great. Like, it doesn't have to be violent. It's just building. It's just creativity. And I've tried showing her some videos, and she's she hasn't responded too much to it, but I feel like I haven't picked my times too wisely, but I've been trying to share that with my family, and like I said, some of my cousins and stuff, we've shared gaming in different ways, and so that is one of those things where the experiences are becoming more diverse now, and it is so excellent when someone who typically wouldn't play games, like, you find something that just speaks to them.
Yeah, I know recently too, like my grandma and grandpa were asking about Wii bowling. I don't know, a few months ago, and I was like, oh, they don't really have it out anymore. But I think it would be cool to like hook it up and like have it at another family event because they still like to be competitive when they can. I mean, even though they're older, everybody likes to be
Reading
competitive and.
reading between the lines on that, Mike, I feel like it's just something that they want to sort of share those memories and, whether it be Wii bowling or a different game or just a different activity altogether, like that's sort of where I was going earlier, just making sure it was your grandfather because unfortunately it's not something that I've ever done with any of my grandparents. Even my parents, it's prying teeth to even make them just watch, or not even make them, but just see if they're interested to watch all of us when we're getting together for the holidays or whatever it may be, where I'm together with my siblings, that is. But no, I think that's great that they're not putting their differences aside, but just kind of like learning something or doing this new activity with you, whether it be they love you and this is sort of how they're showing that affection. That I think is very, very powerful, very incredible too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you could tell they're having fun too with it. I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of, they're like, oh, we'll do this for Mike or whatever. But
Do they let
they,
you in?
I think what's that?
Do they let you in?
What do you mean?
Like, do they lose on purpose? Throw a ball
Oh,
into the gutter?
no, no.
I'm
Like I
teasing.
was saying, like he's really into it. Like he's actually bowling, and people in the family were like, "Settle down, Grandpa. Like you
Oh
don't
my
need to
God.
do a full like hit the table like full swing." Like
Yeah,
I don't
It's the type
know.
of video that's gonna go viral if you post it on YouTube.
that reminded me
Yeah.
of.
For,
Yeah, that reminded me of. Oh, sorry.
oh, that's all. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you just reminded me. There was two more quick points I wanted to bring up about family and video games. My cousin and my aunt, uh, both of them, my aunt and her daughter, that's my cousin. Like it was funny because they weren't super big into video games, and my this aunt and uncle on my mom's side, I had three cousins there, two girls and one boy, and the boy is like 2 or 3 years older than me. The middle girl is my age, and then the younger one is like my sister's age. So they weren't super big into video games, but they bought a lot of the video games like up until, or a lot of the consoles up until like N64. Like they had Nintendo. I'm pretty sure they had Super Nintendo and they had Nintendo 64. Um, but for the longest time, my cousin and her mom actually played Donkey Kong 64 together. Like every once in a while, they would just sit down and for a couple hours, they'd just play and they were working together to go through and just literally collect everything and beat the game. And they even had the N64 hooked up to an old CRT once they had like rearranged things around the house. Like there's
Oh
this
my
old
God.
not even 20-inch CRT that they just set on one of like the TV stands that unfolds and it's sitting in the parlor room and they had it set up and they would just pull it out every once in a while and they'd just be playing it together. I didn't really see them playing it too much, but they would do that together. And when I heard about that, and they because I saw like the N64 one day when just ran one, I'm like, oh, what's going on there? And that was the story. I was just like, holy crap, that's so cool. And so I wasn't
Nice.
directly involved in that, but yeah, my cousin would sometimes play games with me. And like I said, she's dated people and who were bigger into games, and so she was exposed to a lot of that, and we were close, so she always gave me a chance with that as well. Then the other part was I forgot Borderlands 2. Borderlands 1 and 2 really, but more specifically Borderlands 2 was such a huge moment in video games for me in terms of friends and family among other games where I literally had like 8 people I could play with at any point in time, and I was the one who got a lot of people into Borderlands 1 because at the time it launched to like decent reviews, but a lot of people were
It's a
skeptical.
very underrated game at launch.
Yeah, and I pushed for it, and I still have friends from when I worked at Toys R Us originally when it came out, and I was like, uh, I was totally excited for it. I got it. I'm like, guys, this game's so good. It's got such a great art style, and it's super fun, and you can just drop in, drop out, 4-player co-op online. It's so fun, and it's you call up the whole campaign. And some of them were skeptical, but they eventually bought it, and then they were like, dude, you totally like if you hadn't just bugged me about it, like I totally wouldn't have been playing this. Like I had no idea I'd have so much fun. And then on my dad's side, I'm really close with them, and a lot of them are more into gaming. My uncle actually played a big part in my gaming. He actually was a PC gamer more often than not, and he got my cousin, his daughter, a couple different families here. So the one with Donkey Kong is on my mom's side, and then this other one was on my dad's side. And she had a bunch of the systems, and he had a computer, and he set his computer up on his TV in his bedroom, and every once in a while he'd set it up. And I'm talking about when we are like 12 to 13, and she was like 5 years younger than me. She was a year younger than my sister. She is a year younger than my sister, and we would watch my uncle play Duke Nukem or Doom on his computer, and then we'd go over to the bedroom and we'd play N64, whether that was like Pokemon or Mario or whatever it was, or even and when I'm saying Pokemon, she had Hey You Pikachu for a little bit, or Pokemon Snap, or even Smash Brothers 64 when that came out, and so when we all got older, we were all still into gaming, and online gaming was happening, and Borderlands 2 came out, and we all had Xbox 360s, and we all bought a copy of the game, and we just would log on, and we'd be texting each other and be like, "Hey, you jumping on? Yeah, I'm jumping on." We just get our tons of four-man crews going, and just we'd spend so much time. We spent hours playing that game and distributing loot. Like we had a complete understanding of, okay, you can grab whatever loot you want, and then when we after we like finish a mission or something, we all get to town and we dump out all our loot on the floor. Like you get to keep whatever you want, and then dump all your spares out on the floor for people to pick through and whatnot. So that way we could maybe get some gear that we're missing, or just sell off stuff and get some extra cash. And we worked out the system, and yeah, I had my family and my friends all playing the game at once, and it was just such a crazy cool moment uh, in video games for me.
I can relate to a lot of that with Borderlands because that's like still to this day one of the probably biggest AAA titles, which at the time not so much, but I think it took my brothers and I like a year or two after the release date to buy it, and then we were just, we were playing it nonstop. That's also one of those games that we were playing years back that I was referencing earlier. So totally hear you when it comes to Borderlands, the drop in, drop out. That was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I can't say much about Borderlands because I think I've only played it one time with Nate at Nate's house, but
Hmm.
but yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then we'll end on this note here, unless anyone's got any final comments. But video games can be a huge source of positivity, and as we've stated from this, it can not only impact our lives in so many different ways, but also just helps us bring people closer together, whether that's friends or family, and allows us to maintain a lot of friendships in a time when we can't necessarily be in the same room with each other. And we've been managing that. Like most of us own a Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, Paul does not have a Switch, but we're hoping
Not
he'll be
yet.
able to get one soon. And yeah, we've been even before all this started, like the four of us were all getting together and playing video games. And I'm sure Mark, you're playing with your brothers in different games, and Mike had his own group of friends, and they were playing games and stuff, and we'd still all come together, and we would do our own games and stuff, and we all have our things, and we're trying new stuff together, and hanging out. And just now with the fact that we can't be together, we're playing some stuff online. So like me, Mike, and a couple people play Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, and then we've been super lucky that we have almost, actually we probably do have more than 12 people that own Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and that game supports up to 12 players online, and we can just all jump in, and we've been doing a standing thing every Wednesday with a bunch of people, and just whoever can show up that night, we're just getting together, we're jumping on Discord to chat, and then we just do a bunch of races until we're tired. And then, I mean, like, that's pretty much the only reason we stop is because we're tired, not because we're not having fun. And we just get to chat and catch up and all enjoying a game together. So
Breaks the
um,
monotony of quarantine up quite a bit.
yeah, and it's meant a lot. I know to you, Mark, um, and I've had a lot of fun being talking and with new people, and just being able to share that with so many people and have that has been fantastic, even without the pandemic. Although it did, it provided a unique situation because otherwise we wouldn't have necessarily had the reason to do that because we could just
Yeah,
we would just be in the same room together, but we're still keeping it going, and it's thanks to video games we have this other opportunity to connect.
absolutely.
Yeah, Mario Kart Wednesdays has been a lot of fun.
So it might not be Mario Kart going forward once things start to improve, but we will always have had that time, and it will still be an option. And good on Nintendo for making such great games, and there's still so many other games to come that we can enjoy and try and experience, and so many other games that different people that aren't our friends, all you listeners out there, you've got your games that you've connected with other people on. It's just good to remember that the world can be a great place, and there's so many other ways for us to connect and come together.
All unite for one cause without, diving into the details. We can all be online together and having fun and take a break.
Except for the lag.
Yes, we need much better netcode to make sure that our connections to each other are stable, both in our hearts and in our games.
Yes.
But yeah, any final comments before that? I think we've had a really good episode today.
Real quick, which is, can of worms, which we won't get into necessarily the specifics today. The amount of studies and the amount of good that there are within video games, it's definitely a topic that we can dive into a little bit deeper, and come with studies and reports. I know that we were kind of just talking more personal stories and anecdotes, but it's something that, does exist without us really referencing too much in detail today. But there's so much positive to what video games offers. Maybe a future episode topic.
Yeah, very possible. We'll discuss the specifics and figure it out and schedule it, because obviously we gotta edit and get the episodes up. I don't want to fall too far behind. But yeah, definitely we're gonna keep going. That's the whole point. And this is another aspect of video games bringing us together, even if it's not playing them. It's talking about them. Mike, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we sign off?
Nothing specific, but yeah, I've enjoyed doing the podcasts and uh, doing the online video games, even though we can't play them in person. That's like, a great thing about, living nowadays versus, say, this happened in 2000 or something like that. Like, if this happened in 2000, we wouldn't be able to play the same games online or even have the same experience online. I know there were some games back then online, but it wasn't the same as it is
Very
now.
few. Yeah,
Yeah.
and not as widespread. I think most of it, online gaming had to be done with PCs, and back then PC gaming was way more messy than it is today. But yeah,
But yeah.
sorry.
Oh, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for everyone being here, and we'll just thank Paul again for being with us, and we thank you all listeners for being with us. Much love to you all. We hope that video games continues to bring you positive experiences and helps get you through the rough times, whether that's today, yesterday, or in the future. And yeah, we're all connected as people, so take care, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Be good.
All right. See you.